Today I'm going to talk about my journey being a people pleaser. This video is going to be a little bit different than some of the other videos you've seen on this channel. It's going to be a little bit more rambly, a little bit more self-reflective, and a little bit more of a journal entry. If you like videos like this one, please let me know down in the comments below. When I got to school, I was very green and very fresh and kind of coming off having been homeschooled. And so I found myself often trying to behave in ways that the most people would like me. But I've been noticing recently how many times I am biting my tongue in conversations because I'm worried about what someone is going to think about something I'm about to say. Now it just feels like there's all of this anger, all this frustration, all this stuff under the surface that just wants to come out so badly. I felt like in that new phase I could stand up for myself a little bit more. I could say no to people. But there isn't a bunch of positive reinforcement when you stand up for yourself, especially not initially. Right now there is a huge obsession with therapy and therapy culture. One of the things that I would really like to avoid in this video is leaning into that too heavily. I want to talk about this just in terms of my actual life and what I've experienced. Now, I've never had like an official diagnosis as a people pleaser, but looking into it more and hearing about it more, there was a lot that I seemed to identify with. Now, part of this could just be that I'm an older brother. So I have two younger siblings that are older than me. My older sister is 12 years older than me. For the most part, when I was at home as a kid, I was kind of the eldest of the three of us who were at home. The reason why I want to talk about being a people pleaser at all is that I think it's crept into my life in ways that I was not fully aware of when it was happening. So I thought that I was just trying to make good friends. I thought I was just trying to be nice. And what ended up happening was slowly over time, resentment built up in relationships that kind of caused a degree of pressure. It was like pressure behind a dam. And eventually something happened that just put too much pressure behind the dam and it broke open and friendships ended up falling apart because there was all of this pressure. There's a couple of very prominent instances in my life where this led to just friendships kind of falling apart because things were left unspoken. And over time, those small little infractions built up, right? Because even though maybe physically I convince myself that I no longer think about them, maybe I sort of pretend like, hey, that's not at the forefront of my mind, or that's not something that I'm concerned about, it sort of changes my perception of that person. And the more that they say things to me that offend me or upset me, that go unaddressed, the less likely I want to hang out with them, the less time I want to spend with them. And so even though I can sort of intellectualize my way through like, oh, you don't need to deal with this isn't a big deal, I think that it was. And interacting in my life now, I'm trying to speak to those things when they happen. One of the things that I've really been struggling with is kind of the difference between how I believe that people are going to perceive the things that I'm saying versus how they're actually going to perceive the things that I'm saying. And it's difficult because there are situations where I really want to be nice. Like I want to be a nice person. And I think for the most part, I am a really nice person. But I've been noticing recently how many times I am biting my tongue in conversations because I'm worried about what someone is going to think about something I'm about to say. I'm thinking about, well, wait, maybe they disagree with this point that I'm about to make. Maybe they are going to think I'm a terrible person for having this idea. And then I look back at my own life, and almost everyone in my life, there is something that we do not stand in total agreement on, right? Like we had different life experiences. We look at the world in slightly different ways. Of course, we don't agree on absolutely everything. That would be absurd. But almost all of those people I still love and respect and cherish, right? And we might be having a conversation about something I am deeply passionate about. And, just as a silly example, maybe we're talking about a movie that I really love. Like maybe we're talking about Wes Anderson's The Grand Budapest Hotel. And they say, I really thought that movie was dumb and kind of sucked and was corny. I love that movie. I don't think it's dumb. I don't think it sucks. I don't think it's corny. But simply them having a different perspective than me doesn't change my view of that person. It doesn't change the way I think about them in any other context, right? So why is it the case that when those roles are reversed, when I'm the one who is worried about saying, I don't like that thing, or I'm not really into that kind of music, that I find myself biting my tongue? Like most of the time, these aren't major big deal kind of issues. It's just like little things in life that I find I don't want to tell someone I don't like or I'm not into. There was an old episode of John and Hank Green's podcast, or maybe it was in Vlogbrothers, and John Green said, why do I keep lying to people about having seen a movie? When someone's like, hey, you've seen Parasite, right? And you go, oh yeah, I've seen Parasite, when you haven't seen Parasite. Like there's this inclination where someone will say something and I just pretend that I know what they're talking about. Maybe it's a fear of being seen as dumb, or a fear of not being cultured, or a fear that they're gonna judge me if I don't know this thing. One of the things I really appreciated about my fiance when I first met her was her willingness to ask questions. We'd be in a group of people, right? We'd all be hanging out and someone would say something and she would just say, "What's that?" And the person would go, "Oh yeah, that's just," and they would explain it. And it's very possible that in most of those scenarios, no one else knew what they were talking about either. But for whatever reason, I didn't have the courage to say, "What's that?" Like, I didn't have the courage to ask that kind of question, maybe because I was worried about how it would make me look, but ultimately it led to a worse conversation because suddenly I don't know what anyone's talking about, right? Suddenly I am out of the loop because I'm pretending to be a part of this conversation as opposed to actually being a part of this conversation. So that's something that I've really struggled with, is how do you, in those situations, convince yourself to ask the questions? And there's a certain degree to which I've gotten better at asking questions. And I'll catch myself in those moments going, why aren't you asking them what that is? You clearly don't know what it is that they're talking about. Or don't lie about having read that book or watched that movie. Just tell them no. And perhaps it's just a lack of confidence that I've had. But that is something that I'm really working on, is just the minimal level of when I'm in a conversation with someone, feeling comfortable asking questions, feeling comfortable not knowing the answer, and being willing to say, hey, what is that? And most of the time, I've found that people are really willing to explain it. I was really unhappy my senior year with kind of who I was and where I felt I'd been pigeonholed in college. When I got to school, I was very green and very fresh and kind of coming off having been homeschooled. And so I found myself often trying to behave in ways that the most people would like me. Like I really wanted people to like me, as I think everybody does in college, but maybe perhaps me even more so, because I didn't have this experience of what is it like to be in social situations? What is it like to hang out with people my own age all of the time? I was so used to being around groups of people who were younger than me and older than me, and so being around a group of people who were all my age suddenly was a challenge that I had not expected. And how to interface with them, how to interact with them, how to joke around, how to have fun, it became a lot easier for me to take a part of my personality and accentuate that as opposed to just showing my whole personality. So I really leaned on the side of myself that made people laugh. And oftentimes that was acting in ways that were goofy and silly and kind of not taking things very seriously. Like that was sort of my overall demeanor, especially my first semester freshman year. I leaned into that really heavily. I would say stupid jokes all of the time. I would make crazy arguments all of the time that would lead to laughter and chaos. I always wanted to have fun. I wasn't going to take things too seriously. And that was a fun person to be. It was fun to just embody that. To run and just do a somersault over the couch in the dorm lobby, or to post wacky photos on Snapchat. Like, I just wanted to be goofy, right? Because I found that goofy really worked for me. And looking back, I don't know how much people were laughing at me or with me. That's a whole nother thing. But I found that I could be goofy, I could be silly, and that was a fun way to show myself to a group of people. And I made a lot of friends that way. It was really easy for people to get to know me and get along, and we had a really good time. But I got to the end of my first semester of freshman year and I felt pretty exhausted by that character, essentially, that I was playing. Like, I was sort of acting that way 24/7. It was never turned off. It was genuinely a part of me, like absolutely 100%, but it wasn't all of me. And I felt like there was a part of me that was more serious, that was a little bit more intellectual, that wanted to be taken more seriously, that I'd left out, right? Like that part of me wasn't there. And so I really tried to change that over the next 4 years. I really tried to lean away from it. And there were times where that was okay, but I felt really trapped by that character I had created first semester of freshman year. Now, all of this being said, I went to a very small school. There were like 600 people in my class. There were like 2,400 students total at Denison. I didn't go to OSU, even though I'm wearing a hoodie. Had I gone to a school like that, I might have been able to kind of find a new group of people and assimilate. But when I was in such a tight-knit group, I met every one of those 600 students in that first semester. And the impression they got of me was the impression of the guy who would get drunk and do crazy dances and go do shirtless somersaults on the quad. Like, that was the guy who people knew, who would post goofy photos on Instagram and Snapchat and was just kind of a silly guy to be around. But still, I felt trapped by that. I felt like I wasn't able to have the deeper, more intellectual conversations that I was really craving. And so as time went on, that became a really difficult persona to break out of. When I acted in ways that were not in alignment with that character, sometimes people would respond in really negative ways because they had come to believe a certain version of who I was. Let's be really fair. So did everyone else, right? Everyone else also accentuated a small part of their personality and made that their whole personality when they first got to college. You find what works and you lean into what works. Everyone's doing that. While I wasn't able to see it at the time, I was also judging people as it was feeling like they were different people than they were last semester. When it was feeling like, why are these people acting so differently? And a lot of that was just people coming out of their shell and showing themselves more fully. And it was a little bit uncomfortable because I felt like I knew everyone. Right? Even though I knew that I was being guarded, I didn't think everyone else was being guarded. But over time, I found that, oh my gosh, everybody here is being guarded. Everyone has these walls up and is leaning on a part of their personality and hiding other parts of their personality. And maybe that's part of the reason why it's so fun to be in a new place, because you can sort of transform who you are to some degree. But over time, your core personality, like who you are, what you believe in, the ethics you grew up with eventually do creep out. Like, you're not going to just suppress them forever. And they have to be integrated into who you are as a person. But like everyone, I still wanted to be liked. You want to be a part of the pack. You want to be a part of the group. You want everyone to enjoy having you around and want to have you around and invite you to stuff. Even though I was trying to open up more, I really didn't want to be disagreeable. I wanted to be the kind of person that could be invited to everywhere, who would never be problematic, who wouldn't cause any tension, wouldn't cause any conflict, was just there to have a good time. But the only way that you're able to get there is if you're ignoring certain things, right? If either I'm ignoring how I'm feeling internally or I'm ignoring what's happening around me, because obviously there's going to be things where conflict arises. If you're around a bunch of people 24/7, which I was living with some of these people, I was hanging out with everyone else all of the time. There was almost no time when I was alone, really. Conflict arises. It just happens naturally. And my strategy for most of that time was just to kind of try to let it go. And I thought I was letting it go. And over time, I've realized that I was just pushing it down further and further. So once I graduated college and I wanted to kind of step into being a new person, I wanted to kind of explore who I was more fully. I didn't want to be held back by the same constraints that I had in undergrad. That was really exciting because it felt like this transition could be the point of really stepping into who I want to be as an adult. I felt like in that new phase, I could stand up for myself a little bit more. I could say no to people. I had a little bit more authority. I felt like people were treating me a little bit older. Something happened then that I didn't expect. I remember having a conversation with a friend, and this was one of the friends that I had had in college that we were really close. Over the years, there had just been a little bit of distance growing between us. That there was things that happened that maybe I didn't feel so great about. I decided not to tell him, and then we just kind of pushed our separate ways. I kind of assumed that we would just kind of drift apart, but we ended up in the same city. And so periodically we'd see one another. And it always felt a little bit weird. It always felt a little bit forced, but it was okay. I even thought, well, maybe with enough of this, we'll become close again. Now, this was also at a stage where I was feeling a lot more confident. I was feeling much more like I can say what I actually think. I don't feel constrained by everyone else around me. I'm going to be a lot more free. I'm going to be a lot more honest. And about 6 months later, he came to me and we had a long conversation. And there was a lot in that conversation which was really difficult and really hard to unpack. And to some degree, I was really surprised that the conversation even took place. But one of the things that he said in that conversation was, you know, you've really changed, man. Like, you're really different than who you were in college. And it's kind of tough to be around. And that hit me hard because I had changed and I had been working at that change. And really, this was the change that I'd wanted to make for a very long time. This was the change that I had really been trying to make throughout college, but never could successfully make that jump until after I graduated. It felt like I was showing my true colors. And he was saying, I don't like that. And I think what happened was that there was a perception that he had of who I was, right? A perception that had been built up over a string of experiences. Experiences that occurred in a time when I was really trying to be well-liked. And when I stepped into a spot where I wanted to be more honest, where I wanted to be more clear, I still wanted to be nice, by the way. I wasn't trying to be mean or anything. I just wanted to be more assertive. I wanted to be more forthright in terms of what I was looking for. I think that was really off-putting. And so one of the reasons why I think it is so hard, and I have gotten trapped in these spots in the past, is because there are negative forces and it feels like someone is acting differently, we go, oh, whoa, what's wrong? What's going on here? That's a bad thing. So through this journey of like trying to open up, what I've found is that standing up for yourself doesn't always lead to immediately positive results. And it's silly to even say that, right? Because if it did, everyone would do it, right? If everyone wanted everyone else around them to stand up for themselves and not be a people pleaser, then there would be all of this positive reinforcement when you stand up for yourself. But there isn't a bunch of positive reinforcement when you stand up for yourself, especially not initially. And part of that is just the change you're experiencing of like, I'm being seen as someone different now. But part of that is that there just genuinely will be conflict. If you're someone who is highly conflict avoidant and you're working to stand up for yourself, the thing you've been avoiding is conflict. And so what you'll experience by standing up for yourself is conflict, right? It's not just gonna be peaceful. It's not like everyone's just gonna be happy all the time. Like, there will be conflict. But I don't necessarily think that that's a bad thing. Now, conflict can also be handled with grace and poise. It doesn't have to be handled with brutality and anger and mean things being said to each other. It can be handled with kindness. I want both of us to walk away from this being pleased. Now, where that line is has been difficult for me, especially kind of emerging out of the space that I was just in. If you're saying nothing for a very long time, like I was, if I was just kind of letting people walk over me, I was letting things happen, and I was just trying to let it go, I don't always know what a proportional response is because I haven't had practice doing it. Because I've had a ton of instances in my life where something large has happened and my response has been psst, right? It's been almost nothing because all of that other response is internal. And then I've had instances where something tiny has happened and my response is because all of that stuff internal is coming out. And so there is a practice that has to happen of learning how to have a proportional response to something that someone is saying. And that's something that I'm still working on. That's something that's still difficult for me. Because in the past, if I've just waited so long to say anything, now it just feels like there's all of this anger, all this frustration, all this stuff under the surface that just wants to come out so badly. Calibration of that has taken some time. I also think there were large lessons learned from when it was improportional, right? When there were cases where I did not respond appropriately in the past and felt all walked over, and then that over time eventually built up and exploded. Like, that was really, really painful when that happened. Even though I was the one, having to have those hard conversations and eventually kind of leading to kind of the end of those friendships, that was still really painful to go through. And it's something that I would like to avoid in the future. Trying to respond to those things as much as I can in the moment and not allowing them to build up over time, I think leads to healthier relationships. It's so easy for things to go unspoken, to just become like, why don't they just know that? We're all dealing with all of our own shit all of the time. Like, I don't know what you're thinking about unless you tell me. I can't read your mind. I'm sorry. You also can't read my mind. If I'm upset with you and I don't tell you that I'm upset with you and you have no way of knowing that I'm upset with you, how are you possibly supposed to know that I'm upset with you? There is this necessity to say these things because otherwise they just fester under the surface, and that's not good for anyone. And look, I still really value being a nice person. I really want to be someone who people think of as a nice, kind guy. I want to be very fair, I want to be honest, and I want people to enjoy having me around. But it's been really easy for me in the past to conflate niceness and kindness with agreeability, even when I don't agree with what someone's talking about. And that doesn't mean that every single time now someone says something, I need to be like, hey, actually, I don't agree with what you're saying at all. Like, no, that's not what I'm talking about. But in many instances, pushing back a little bit. And maybe it's just like, I don't know if that's quite how I see that thing. Maybe it's even as subtle as, wait, tell me more about that. That's fascinating. I'm still not looking for a fight, I can promise you that, but I want people to really know what I think. One of the things I really value is respect. I really try to respect other people, and in turn, I hope to be respected, right? That's deeply important to me. And I think for someone to respect you, they have to know that you're willing to say what's on your mind. They have to know that you have integrity, right? That your actions align with your values, that align with your thinking. When I'm just trying to be nice and appease everyone around me, while it might be nice for the people that are around me in that moment, I am not acting with integrity. And you can see that, you can feel that, you can taste that. Now, looking back on this is sort of hypocritical, but I remember being really upset at a girlfriend in college. And she and I had a conversation about like prenups or something. And I was against prenups in this conversation, and she was like totally on my side. And then she had a conversation with somebody else, and I happened to be in the room, and he was talking about prenups, and he was like totally for prenups, and she was totally on his side. And I just felt betrayed because I was like, you're lying in one of these cases, right? Like, both of these things can't be true at the same time. So in one of them, you're not being honest. And that actually became a legitimate fight that we had. In retrospect, I think I see what was happening, which is I want to appeal to everyone around me. I want people to be nice to me. And I'm going to subjugate my own feelings for being liked by the people around me. Like, the most important thing is that I'm liked by the people around me. It doesn't actually matter what I think. But when I saw that, it really felt dirty. It really felt like, oh wow, you're not telling me what you think. I don't really know who you are. Like, I would much rather disagree with someone and know who they are than happen to agree with everything someone's saying, but it just being a yes man situation. So this whole journey of moving past this is something that I'm still working on. I know this video is rambling all over the place, and if you made it this far, like, congratulations, thank you so much for watching. To me, I think this was a little bit more of just a reflection of where I'm at and what I'm dealing with, and trying to be more honest in my communication, trying to say things that I actually think, and trying not to care quite so much what someone else's perspective is. Oh my gosh, and like, thinking back on it, I've had times where I'm having a conversation with someone, and before I speak, my whole filter is like trying to think through every single thing that I'm going to say to make sure that I'm not just offending them, but like saying something that I know that they disagree with before I speak. And what often comes out is just bland nonsense. When I'm in those conversations, I end up saying nothing interesting at all. I'd much rather disagree with you and actually have something interesting to talk about and share than it going through this filter of like, oh, I need to make sure you don't disagree with any of my perspectives. I don't really have an ending to this story. This is still an ongoing journey. This is still something that I'm working on, but I am actively trying to get better at it and recognize that it's not always going to be smooth sailing. Sometimes people are going to respond in ways that are surprising, shocking, upsetting even. But that's part of the journey, and that's part of growing up. So if you enjoyed this breakdown, this style of video, this kind of self-reflection, let me know. I would love to do more content like this in the future. Thank you everyone for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.